Hello, everyone. Today, I want to discuss a little bit about a new topic. So originally, this channel started as Gutierrez Programming. So it was originally just for primarily programming purposes. However, I think a few months back, I changed the name of the channel to Daily Functional Programming. The intention of this is that I really want the videos to be more so in the scope of helpful tips in really any subject. So previously, I did a video on card skimming or shimming, I believe. And uh, and so I was hoping to tackle other kind of topics that may be able to help others. It's not really going to be in any one particular field. However, one that I do hope to target is finances. So while I am not a financial advisor, over the past few years, I've self-studied, I would say, some financing topics. And so I've had a lot of fun with it. Now that I'm working a little bit more, I have enough to start investing and kind of playing around with it. One thing I will say is, while I will be sharing some financial information, I always recommend doing your own research when making investing decisions. This is just going to be a series of what I tend to do. I'm going to be transparent about uh, the trades that I make and just kind of the fun that I have doing it. For me, it's just a bit of a hobby, and it can be a little bit advantageous as well, but. It's just a bit of a hobby, so this is not financial advice to anyone. This is just so that you could kind of see what uh, tools are out there, what strategies are out there. Maybe hopefully if it gets you incentivized to, maybe invest in some way, whether it's your 401k, whether it's your IRA, or whether it's just in regular brokerage. That's awesome because investing is, a way to build wealth over time so that you could have, money potentially for um, your retirement and so forth. But that's it. Once again, this is not financial advice to anyone. This is just going to be for myself and just to be able to kind of share a bit of a fun journey. Similar to this past week with Roaring Kitty, right? Just kind of being able to kind of share some of the excitement, very similar in that regard. So a summary of what this video is about. So in this case, what I've done is I've sold covered calls on what I believe are undervalued companies. And I always try to target those with higher volatility, higher IV or implied volatility, to make it worthwhile when selling covered calls. That's in a nutshell what I try to do. And this is what I'll be sharing for today. I'll create in the future a video regarding to summarize what covered calls are, because I understand not everyone might be familiar with them, and then as well as other stock strategies that are available. Now, that said, this is going to be using my Robinhood brokerage. There are other brokerages that exist, like Fidelity, Vanguard. Those are very reputable brokerages. Of course, there's also like Webull and SOFI Invest and so forth. Definitely a lot of other brokerages that exist. So I'm just sharing the brokerage that I tend to use. They all tend to have similar functionalities in the sense that they all have access to similar securities that you could play with. So for the purpose of this video, what have I been doing this week, or will I be doing this week? So I have SoFi covered calls at a strike price of $7 for June 14th. So what does that mean? Right, let's break that down a little bit. So a covered call is, in order to kind of be involved in a covered call, you have to buy 100 shares of a stock. So if you want to sell a contract or sell an option, you have to first buy 100 shares. So if we look at SoFi right here on the right-hand side, here the purchase price right now is $6.97. This is a banking stock. This is one I've looked into, and I feel confident about it for myself. Right, once again, I'm not recommending anyone to invest in this, but this is just for myself. So what did I do this Friday? This Friday, I went ahead and purchased uh, batches of 100 shares for $7.02. So that's my cost basis. Another way of saying this is, out of all the shares that I bought, they were about $7.02. That's my cost basis. And I bought 13,000 of them. So that's equivalent to what would be, if you divide this by 100, 130 contracts worth, 130 options worth that I could sell. So for this strategy, it's kind of a little bit resource intensive in the sense that you have to buy it in 100 batches. You don't have to buy 13,000. You just have to buy a minimum 100 to sell one contract. So in this case, I'm always buying in terms of 100s. Now that said, once I've purchased that, the next step becomes, so once again, keep in mind the $7.02. Now it's a little bit lower in this case, so that's why it looks like it went down a few $100, right? which is okay. So then what did I do in that moment? I then went to the options. So if you go to the options, so actually if I go to just view options, there's a few things that you have to do. You have to select two parts. Number one, what's the date in which you want your expiration? Do you want a farther out date for the option or do you want a closer date? Now, since I'm selling the option, it's more beneficial for me to do a shorter date because uh, I get essentially more money back per unit time. We'll talk about that in a later video, but this one's only a week out. So you can see it says 6D for 6 days for June 14th. And today's the 8th, right? We can see that here. So what I went ahead and did yesterday was I sold this option, and specifically I sold this at about $17 per contract. So let's take a look at it. If you take a look at it, you can see that it's 6/14 expiration date, and I sold it at 0.1696. This roughly essentially rounds up to 17 cents. Now, this can be confusing to people at times because it says 17 cents, well, right, roughly 17 cents, but you might think I'll be referring to it as $17. The reason is contracts are always in the form of 100 shares, or almost always in the form of 100 shares. So you have to multiply it by 100, you get $17. So going back to that, I sold 130 of them because I had 13,000 shares. So then divided by 100, I had let's not think about it in the 130. Actually, let's just think about it as one contract. So what happens is I sold one contract for $17, right? So that's kind of nice. So $17, that's my premium. So I like to call it rent. So that's the money that I get, and it's guaranteed. So I'll be receiving that rent. Actually, you already receive it as soon as you sell it. You receive that $17. And then you have an obligation on that contract on your shares. Your 100 shares pretty much means they're kind of like held in collateral. You can't really touch them until the expiration date. Now, once again, I'm kind of simplifying it because you can always buy your contract back and then have access to them. But let's keep it simple. So I paid, or I was paid $17. I was paid a $17 rent for 1 week, right? And and what do the people get, right? What do the people get? Well, the people got to buy that contract, and essentially, if this kind of stock SoFi ends up going to the moon, like let's say it goes to $8, they'll make $100 off of it, minus the $17 that they paid. They'll make $83 profit. They'll make 5x their money if it jumps up to like $8 in a week. Now, how likely is that? Pretty unlikely. It's very improbable. So most likely, SoFi will stay. Uh, just for in my own opinion, SoFi will stay depressed because it's been going down and it's been staying kind of low, which I tend to like. So what happens is the people who buy the calls on it, they'll kind of buy this, hoping that it goes up. Generally, it hasn't done so. It actually has been going down a little bit, and then they end up kind of losing that money. So that $17 of theirs goes away. Um, So let's look at the scenarios. So once again, I received $17, but I'm saying that if it's $7 or above by the expiration date, which is 6/14, so the end of day, which is about 1 p.m. PST, if it ends up being above $7, they take away my shares. They take the 100 shares that I originally had, they take them away, and they pay me $7. Now you might be saying, wait, what's going on? Because I said earlier that I bought them for $7.02, right? That's what I said earlier, and that's correct. I bought it for $7.02, but I'm selling them if it's $7 or above on Friday at 1 p.m. If it's above $7, they're paying me only $7. That means I'm losing 2 cents per share, or roughly $2 per contract. But that's okay because they're going to pay me, or they already paid me $17. So $17 minus the $2 that I'm losing, I'm still up $15. So my max profit, if it's above $7 next week, is $15. Now that might not sound like a lot, especially since for one contract, I bought 100 shares worth, so that's $702 that I invested. But let's do the math on this, right? Let's just do the simple math. So I gained $15, but how much did I invest? $702. That is 2%. So in 1 week's time, or 2.1%, right? So let's multiply that 100. That's 2.1% roughly. So in 1 week's time, what happens? If this is above $7, if it's $7 or above, so 7, 701, $10, $1 million per share, right? Whatever it is, I get to earn 2% of my money. That's pretty much what's happening there. Now, um, or effectively $15 per contract. So each contract I'm getting $15. Now, obviously, I don't have just one contract. I have uh, several contracts out there. So if it were above, uh, if it were above $7, then that would be 15 contracts, or sorry, $15 per contract, and I have 130 contracts. The max profit that I could receive, if it's so the max profit, if it ends up being a $7 or above, is for the week I would get $1,950. Right. So, kind of pretty nice rent, I like to think. Now you might be saying this is all if it's $7 or above, but what happens if it's less than $7? What happens in that case? Well, what happens in that case is, regardless, the contract is going to expire on 6/14 next Friday, and if the contract expires next week and it's not above $7, essentially the person who bought it off me, that obligation, they're not going to exercise the call. I know I'm kind of throwing some terms around, but they're not going to exercise it, which means it's going to be valueless for them because it's not worthwhile to exercise, um, because the price will be below the strike price. And so essentially they lose all their money. What happens to me is I no longer have an obligation on my shares. The contract, poof, goes away. It's just gone. And so effectively, I get to keep my 100 shares per contract, right? So, right, 100 shares, and all that happens to me is I still get to keep the $17. I still get to keep the $17, except, I have my shares back as well, and that's it, pretty much. So essentially, for 1 week of being like not touching my shares, I get $17 if it's below the seven. So what would my new cost basis be effectively? So I bought these shares for 702 a piece, but let's say it's below $7, so 6.99 or 6.50 or $5, whatever it may be by next Friday. I'm lowering my cost basis by the premium, by the rent. So effectively, my new price per share is 6.85. And then what can I do? So now next week, if it's under $7, it's almost like if my I had bought in the stock at 6.85, right? That's effectively what it is. And so if it's $6.99, I still profited 14 cents per share, right? Do you see, like, I'm still uh, below that in terms of cost basis, so I could sell it and start making a profit, or right. So that's really the strategy when it comes to covered calls, and that's why I tend to like them. The other reason why I like SoFi is it tends to have a high implied volatility. What that means is, um, for these calls, these contracts, you could take a look at the IV. Let's take a look right here, 47%. This is pretty high. Not as high as like other stocks like AMC or GameStop or whatever it may be, but it's pretty good in the sense that, like, I'm getting a good return back, 2.1% on my money for 1 week. That's massive. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's pretty massive for a 1 week period. Because usually that's what you would usually get for 1 year of leaving your money in a bank. So right now it's more like 4 or 5% because it's very high interest rates, but that's not as common. But anyways, so this is kind of like a little bit of a nice return. And then even if it were under $7, what's nice is I get to keep my shares. Once again, I lowered my cost basis, and I get to do it again next week, and next week, and next week, and next week. So there's a lot of people who are kind of interested in SoFi. SoFi has a bit of good community built around it. I really like listening to a lot of different SoFi YouTubers, people who cover the company. I know there's like Tanner, Tevis, Roy, very, very knowledgeable people. Um, Several other creators are out there as well. So if I didn't name you, I don't mean to disparage you in any way. I just wanted to throw out the names that came to mind. But that said, this is one way to do it. So even if, SoFi is staying at the same price or it's going down in price, this is another way to potentially profit. And that's something that I have been able to do over time. So I just kind of want to share my progress. uh, so this doesn't look as great because you can see here at one point I was down quite significantly. You can see down like 60K, almost down 60, and now I'm up about 28. I say this because, well, actually here I was in the Bitcoin miners. Really, I still believe in the Bitcoin miners. Bitcoin miners are pretty good. It's just that I had to take out some money for reasons I prefer not to talk about. But um, effectively, this past year, I started again selling covered calls. So right here in January, and I've been steadily progressing upwards. And so it's just one strategy that I found for myself. for myself. That helps minimize risk, especially when I target companies that, once again, are I believe are undervalued and I believe are have somewhat of a higher implied volatility. So I hope this helped. I realize that not a lot of people tend to share uh, their account information or their kind of brokerage information just because it tends to be private, and I definitely understand it from that perspective. But I just want to be transparent in the sense that and plus there's no kind of identifying information here, so it's fine. I'm not clicking anywhere that shows any account numbers or so forth. But I just want to be transparent in the sense that this is just what I'm doing. If it helps kind of excite people about the idea of investing, because usually when I talk to people about it, not too excited, which is understandable. But it's just something fun. It's like a hobby. But I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be creating many more videos on this topic because I could talk about it for days or certainly hours at a time, if not days. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.